Breaking news at this moment, Tucker Carlson, who has been very much a focus of everyone ever since Fox unceremoniously parted ways with him just a short time ago. Well, he has announced he's coming back. He's coming back, and he's coming back to Twitter. Twitter being Elon Musk's company that he went in, the billionaire, and bought for a wild amount of money, and is trying to remake in a profitable way, but also in a way, and I've said this from the beginning, if there's anybody that can really rethink Twitter and rethink free speech and rethink the media, it probably is Elon Musk, because the guy's actually legitimately insanely brilliant. But Tucker Carlson now is coming back, and he announced this, that he's going to be taking his show to Twitter, and he just came out slamming the mainstream media. I want you to take a look at this right here. Again, Tucker Carlson just announcing that he's coming back. He's taken his show to Twitter, which, by the way, Twitter recently announced that they would allow longer content there. So I want you to watch this. We'll watch it together.
Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. You often hear people say the news is full of lies, but most of the time that's not exactly right. Much of what you see on television or read the New York Times is in fact true in the literal sense. It could pass one of the media's own fact checks. Lawyers would be willing to sign off on it. In fact, they may have. But that doesn't make it true. It's not true. At the most basic level, the news you consume is a lie of the stealthiest and most insidious kind. Facts have been withheld on purpose, along with proportion and perspective. You are being manipulated. How does that work? Let's see. If I tell you that a man has been unjustly arrested for armed robbery, that is not, strictly speaking, a lie. He may have been framed. At this point, there's been no trial, so no one can really say. But if I don't mention the fact that the same man has been arrested for the same crime 6 times before, am I really informing you? No, I'm not. I'm misleading you. And that's what the news media are doing in every story that matters, every day of the week, every week of the year. What's it like to work in a system like that?
I just got to pause. You know, he's right. I got to say, I have so much to say on this. We got to talk about it because, in fact, the media does mislead. They have a point of view. They shape the news to fit that point of view. And by the way, there's a lot of people that have a lot of influence on all that. So being able to speak freely, that's not easily done on some traditional news platforms. Hello? Been there, right? Let's listen again to Tucker.
After more than 30 years in the middle of it, we could tell you stories. The best you can hope for in the news business at this point is the freedom to tell the fullest truth that you can. But there are always limits. And you know that if you bump up against those limits often enough, you will be fired for it. That's not a guess. It's guaranteed. Every person who works in English language media understands that. The rule of what you can't say defines everything. It's filthy, really, and it's utterly corrupting. You can't have a free society if people aren't allowed to say what they think is true. Speech is the fundamental prerequisite for democracy. That's why it's enshrined in the first of our constitutional amendments. Amazingly, as of tonight, there aren't many platforms left that allow free speech. The last big one remaining in the world, the only one, is Twitter, where we are now. Twitter has long served as the place where our national conversation incubates and develops. Twitter is not a partisan site. Everybody's allowed here, and we think that's a good thing. And yet, for the most part, the news that you see analyzed on Twitter comes from media organizations that are themselves thinly disguised propaganda outlets. You see it on cable news, you talk about it on Twitter. The result may feel like a debate, but actually the gatekeepers are still in charge. We think that's a bad system. We know exactly how it works, and we're sick of it. Starting soon, we'll be bringing a new version of the show we've been doing for the last 6.5 years to Twitter. We'll be bringing some other things too, which we'll tell you about. But for now, we're just grateful to be here. Free speech is the main right that you have. Without it, you have no others. See you soon.
Yeah, here. It is very true. It is so fundamental to our democracy, and yet reporters are so limited. Individuals are so limited. And so the question becomes, how do we make sure that information really and truly gets out? Twitter, as you know, has had quite a storied and difficult past. I have many, many, many friends that lost their Twitter accounts. They were shut down because Twitter didn't like, prior to Elon Musk coming in, something that they said, something that they tweeted. I myself ran into problems with Facebook. These are real limitations. I mean, when you can't even say after 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth that we're in a recession, for goodness sakes, and that's somehow labeled as misinformation, give me a break. I mean, that is just the classic definition. But if the Biden administration doesn't say that it's a recession, oh, well, you can't actually say it's a recession. You see where I'm going with this. I mean, there's many, many examples. We went through them all in March 2020. My view at that point it was very controversial. It remains, for some people, controversial, but I stand by this. You know what? You never should have shut the country down because you needed a strong economy in order to fight that thing. And you know what else you needed? You needed people, as much as possible, those that could continue on in a normal way, needed to be able to do that. Protect those that need protection. But you could not say that. I mean, I can barely even say that now. Think about that. There were things you could not say. And we live in a world now that's so mixed up where if you don't refer to somebody by the proper gender identification that they so choose, if you forget to say they when you really mean him, then somehow you are once again in violation of all these ridiculous rules. So I am telling you, this is going to be good. I will just anecdotally, so a lot of you know, I used to work at Fox, of course. I had the 8 o'clock show actually opposite Tucker on a much smaller network. We were like the redheaded stepchild over at Fox News. I worked at Fox Business. I care passionately about the economy. I care about our markets. I care about the success of us as a nation from an economic perspective. And when I look at politics, as I often do, as you know, it tends to be through this economic prism. Anyway, I was on the little station, and look, there were very much places you could go, places you couldn't go, and it changed every day. I was like, my head was spinning. It was hard to keep up with. It was hard to keep up with. What can you not say now? And that's a really challenging position to be in, certainly as a journalist, as a reporter, when you feel compelled that you need to share information. Now, the verdict's still out on everything, right? But you ought to be able to share some of the information you're getting from here and from there so that you guys can make your own informed conclusions. If we don't have that, then how are we any better than communist China? I was watching a movie recently, and it was on the McCarthy era, and it really, really hit home. It struck me. Because I thought, you know what? This is exactly what we're going through again. It's just the reversal. So back then, it was the libs that were in trouble, right? They were the commies. Now, it's conservatives. And somehow, if you don't remember to call someone a they, or if you think it's a little weird that suddenly gender dysphoria is just taking over the country, somehow that makes you part of an extreme group? I don't think so. I mean, this is just getting kind of crazy. And we ought to be able to have these dialogues in these discussions. I'll tell you an interesting story, just in terms of all what we saw after March 2020, and then as the vaccines came out and as people were trying to have conversations about it, you really couldn't, and to this day, if you go on and you try and Google some of this stuff, you're going to have a very, very challenging time because the information that you're served up is the information that certain people want served up. So unless you know maybe a scientific study specifically, maybe you know a doctor or scientist's name that did a study, unless you know the author of a report, I mean, you have to type in a whole lot of Google search terms in order to drill down and actually get behind the millions and millions of pages that will tell you just exactly what they, and I mean they, want you to hear. And this is troubling to me. I remember seeing a story on an Oxford study that had come out about some concerns about one of the vaccines that some people, they were having some suspected side effects. I don't know it was a study. It was a study done by Oxford University. And, it's the kind of thing that they didn't want out there. Like somebody really didn't want out there. And one of my friends happened to have written a story for a major, major, major publication, one that I used to work at. And I saw it and I thought, oh, wow. And I wanted to read more. And I went downstairs and I tried to pull the website back up and suddenly it was gone. So then I did a Google search and it was gone again. So finally, I did the search. I knew the reporter's name. I knew the study's name. I knew the outlet's name that had published it. And finally, I was able to get this thing. But I thought, wow, that's so interesting. Like, it just immediately disappeared. It was on their front page for like 2 seconds and then immediately disappeared, and you could not find it easily. So what I'm saying is, in this new era, right, when you have AI, we human beings, we matter. Our opinions matter. And our ability to kind of synthesize information and to cut through all the you-know-what, that matters. And so we have to have the ability to employ all of that. I think in a time like this, it's actually more necessary than ever. And so while you should exercise caution, while you should not ever slander anyone, you also need to be able to speak freely, right? Is that something we can agree on? Hey, it's good to see you all here. Jake, good to see you again in East Tennessee. We've got Tim joining. Thank you for being here. We've got a few of you tuning in for this unexpected breaking news. Really, really quite something. I just wanted to bring this to you. It just crossed, and rather interesting to see. Whether or not he can take on Fox News, it's certainly, I think, up for grabs. I mean, I think the ratings are down, 50% at Fox since he left. I know the ratings fell after I left at Fox Business, but maybe, they didn't care. They did get 40 new advertisers. So they brought some advertisers back. I guess that's a good thing. They are making it work however they can. But I think the reality here is that is sort of an industry of yesteryear. The future is ahead of us. There's so much change coming. There is so much ability for all of you and me to connect directly in ways that we never, ever could before. And I think people are ultimately the consumers that will decide this. So you will go and find who you want to listen to every day, every night. You come to this channel, you find me, and hopefully you have subscribed. If you haven't, shameless plug for the station, for the channel, do make sure you subscribe. It's important. I'm over on Twitter as well. And, I think this is very interesting. I think if you start taking more content broadly over these various channels and mechanisms, whether it be Facebook, whether it be, Twitter, I would say Twitter's got a little bit of a leg up in the ability to actually get information out more freely, only because of who their CEO is. And Elon is committed to making sure that you have all speech out there and that it doesn't get just shut down by a particular algorithm that says, nope, you didn't use the right gender pronoun, for goodness sakes. It was they. Anyway, so it's really, really remarkable. We're going to have more coming to you on the show. This is not the whole show. This is not I just wanted to join you because I was here working and the news crossed, and I wanted to show you that because it highlights the point that I'm making all the time, that we can do this together, that we collectively have a voice, and that as much as they try and shut us down, if you subscribe and you hit the bell and you do all that and, go over to my website and sign up for the free newsletter so that we have this way to connect. It's critical that happen. It's critical that it happen because that way we can ensure that truth is heard, that all viewpoints are heard. It's really, truly essential. So yeah, Barry's making the point that if he does this show over at 8:00, it could absolutely ruin Fox. I think there's somewhat of look, they still have 50% of the viewers watching. So there's somewhat of a built-in audience, maybe. Maybe they're able to leverage that with the 40 new advertisers that they brought in. But I'll tell you, I bet you anything for Tucker, I know certainly for me, like money is not everything. And he was making a lot of money there. I don't even know if he was able to do that. They're very restrictive. They're very restrictive. When I left, it was sort of touch and go for a while because you're technically still under contract and they're still paying you. And so there's the things you can do, things you can't do. I'm guessing he was probably able to do that because they may not have had some kind of hold on his ability to go on his social media accounts. But he may have also just forfeited some $20 million by doing that, right? According to reports, he was being paid very, very well. I don't think he necessarily needs the money. I think he probably wants to make sure he's on a platform sooner rather than later, because if he waits all the way until 2025, they can make him rather irrelevant. And that's how these contracts work, right? Because they figure, we brought you in, we invested in you. We don't want you anymore. but we don't want anybody else to have you. So they make it very restrictive so that you cannot actually get out there and reach that audience that you were able to build up. So I think he's saying, well, to heck with that, right? And he's got Elon. I bet he's got Elon on his side because, by the way, they just sat down and did the whole interview together. And I think if people can think intelligently about how we manage to walk this line, I'm not suggesting that there be any kind of violence or hate or content that's obviously hugely inappropriate. I'm just saying that we ought to be able to have intellectual conversations and not get all worked up by the choice of someone's words and not allow the left to take our words and use them against them and contort them in ways to suggest things that really aren't true. You'll recall even how the New York Times positioned I call it sort of a diary entry that Tucker had because he was texting his producer and somebody leaked it to the New York Times. And there was something in there that could have been interpreted perhaps as racist. So not great. But if you read the entire thing, it was actually this rather lengthy essay on self-discovery. And the bottom line, and by the way, they didn't report this. They only reported the headline that was going to fit their narrative. The bottom line was when you got to the end of it, what you saw was he was making the point that we can't view people through a political lens ever because we can't be reduced to that we're all human beings. And I think this is a very important point and one that we all need to think about long and hard right now, especially going into another election where you're going to have a ton of bitterness and you're going to have a whole lot of people that and by the way, it doesn't even matter, okay, Trump, right? Whatever. They're going to do it to DeSantis. They do it to Glenn Youngkin. They did it to Mitt Romney. Remember Obama making fun of Mitt Romney, take your 1980s foreign policy back when he suggested that Russia might be a problem. I mean, this is just their MO. The Democrats are always going to attack the Republicans, whoever they are. And so Republicans feel like, okay, well, I can't give them any ammunition. And they get kind of locked up in this state, and they're so fearful of offending anyone. The left is not afraid of offending anyone. The left is not afraid of canceling anyone. And so I think that this particular time in history is going to offer us all a chance to be more empowered, to have our own thoughts, and hopefully create an environment where the left has to listen. Right? They're going to have to wake up to it's not just their way or the highway. If that were to happen, look, I'll tell you, there's crazier things you think about what's going on in society and how fragile society is and how we don't know anything anymore. You're debating whether a tree is a tree or whether a man is a man or a woman is a woman. This will not end well, and you have only to look at history to know that. Here is my favorite feminist, and by the way, they've totally corrupted feminism, and it's getting corrupted again because now somehow the biological male swimmer thinks that it's feminists who are transphobic against him. Anyway, here is Camille Paglia, noted academic, did her dissertation at Yale, etc., professor in Philadelphia, talking about history and the role of gender dysphoria and sort of the fragileness of society and what that can ultimately lead to. Here we go.
I personally believe that anyone who collaborates in an intrusion into a developing child's body and mind is guilty of child abuse, a crime against humanity. Okay, because that child is not prepared to make such a decision. Okay, I think that.
Okay, that's part of what she's saying, and in saying that, by the way, she herself is sort of, out on the edge. She's out on the edge because these are not things that you're supposed to say nowadays, right? But you got to say them, and you got to understand history, and you got to be able to have these conversations, for goodness sakes, because otherwise you wind up going down a path like this. Listen.
Proof of it. But now I began all of my studies. My book Sexual Personae began as a dissertation at Yale graduate school on androgyny. I've always been fascinated, attracted, to the subject of androgyny, and that's what Sexual Personae is. I explored it in history, but the more I explored it, I realized that that historically, the movement toward androgyny occurs in late phases of culture. Okay, as a civilization is starting to unravel. Okay, and that you can find it again and again and again through history in the Greek art. Okay, you can see it happening. All of a sudden, okay, there's a kind of there's the sculptures of handsome nude young men athletes that used to be very robust. Okay, in the archaic period, suddenly began to seem like wet noodles. Okay, toward the end. Okay, and that the people who live in such periods, a late phase of culture, whether it's the Hellenistic era, whether it's the Roman Empire, whether it's the mauve decade of Oscar Wilde in the 1890s, whether it's Weimar Germany, people who live at such times, okay, feel that they're very sophisticated, they're very cosmopolitan, okay, homosexuality, heterosexuality, so what, anything goes, and so on, all right, and so, but from the perspective of historical distance, okay, you can see that it's a culture that no longer believes in itself, okay, and then what you invariably get are people who are convinced of the power of heroic masculinity, okay, on the edges, whether they're the Vandals and the Huns, okay, or whether they're the barbarians of ISIS, okay, you see them,
Boom. Okay, you see where she's going and you understand why this is dangerous. And when you squelch speech and you tell people they're not allowed to have a voice at the table, and yet simultaneously feed them a bunch of garbage, and you now have a situation where young girls are wondering if they really are supposed to be female, only to then, and I cite the Chloe Cole interview I did the other day, only to then say, wait a second, this is all wrong. I mean, when you get society to that point, what's going to happen? When society is constantly questioning everything, they don't even know if they're male or female. I mean, hey, listen, there's a small percentage of the population that deals with that. And that's obviously really horrible. And, we feel for them. But is it in the numbers that we see now? I don't think so. But when you have this happening, and suddenly if you feel like a girl, you can swim with the girls, you can use the women's restroom, they're handing out feminine products at some university in the traditionally male restrooms because it's crazy, right? And we're not allowed to say that. We're not allowed to speak up. And so when you put people in a corner like that, you do run the risk of additional problems happening. The other thing is, Camille Paglia is saying, you see this through history, whether it be the Huns, whether it be even, what we've seen with the situations in the Middle East, where someone's coming in with a very emphatic viewpoint. We don't want a totalitarian system or that supercharged masculinity. By the way, China's going to risk that because of their only one baby situation for how many years? I mean, they've got an overwhelmingly male population, so they're going to have a lot of testosterone while, you know what we have. Let's see. Can I find the picture? Let me see if I have it here for you. Maybe not. But you know where I'm going. I mean, we have a drag queen recruiting for our Navy. I mean, and we're not supposed to talk about this? This is kind of an issue, guys, all right? I consider myself a pretty open-minded person, but I mean, we got a lot on our plate, and it's going to continue to permeate. I think that what Elon's doing is helpful. I feel like even here on this channel, I've been able to see more of a response from all of you. Again, we're just kind of coming on here. Surprise, surprise. I didn't give you much of a warning. You guys are on me for that too, because I'm like, maybe we'll go live. Why not? We'll go live today. Anyway, we're live. And I just wanted to talk about this with you. I wanted to play that clip from Tucker. And I wanted you to know I am here. And we're going to continue pushing, because our voices need to be heard. Do they not? So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell. Follow me on all my platforms. I'm everywhere on Facebook, Twitter, Locals, which is a great place, trishregan.locals.com, and you can actually interact directly with me there in a whole different kind of way. So very direct way. I think you can even message me, believe it or not, directly, and I'll get it. Self-sustaining people don't fear default. Look, all of you making very interesting comments. The concern about fake news and how that's sort of taken on a life of its own. Some of you have reservations, I see, Shara Lee, about Tucker, working with Elon Musk. Elon has a lot of different things going on, a lot of different ventures. Somebody talking about Geraldo. I don't know if Geraldo's back on Fox. They've really cleaned out a lot of people. I've talked to some of my friends that used to work there. It's really pretty shocking. I think it comes down to probably a lot of mismanagement and not being able to really right the ship. And this one is going to be hard. This one, there's changes that are happening in the media industry that are going to happen, and they're going to be left in the dust because they are the media of yesteryear. Let's move forward, okay? Let's move forward together. I got a show coming later tonight. Love seeing you guys. Great to have you here. Thank you for all your support, and we'll talk later.